most powerful way to think. First principles are the basic parts that make up an idea. They're the most important part of what we know to be true, and we use them to build more complicated ideas. I know this sounds a bit vague right now, so let me give you some background, a comparison, and an example. It's not a new or groundbreaking idea to think from first principles. In fact, it has been the most common way for scientists and thinkers to think for a long time. It's possibly the one thing that all great thinkers have in common. There have been a lot of people who have thought this way, but I'd like to focus on one you may have heard of. The philosopher Aristotle. He was very good at organizing things and thought that everything could be put into groups and subgroups. We call a first principle the smallest subset in any field. He was also one of the first people we knew who was an empiricist. An empiricist is someone who thinks that all information comes from experience. Aristotle was a first principles thinker, which makes sense since he was one of the first important people to study biology. He would cut up animals to learn about the real world, and then he would use his ability to reason to organize and group the information he had learned. One learns the first principles of a subject by going through this cycle of getting information from experience and putting it into order with reason. Aristotle thought that we couldn't have real information if we didn't understand these basic ideas. Now that you know a little bit about the past, let me give you an example of how to think about things from the beginning. Think of the information you have in a certain area as a tree. Someone who thinks about things from the beginning, unusual thinkers, will know everything about that amount of knowledge, from the fruit to the root. What we see in front of us is the fruit. It's knowledge we don't have to work for and can get, use, and repeat right away. We can look at an apple tree and say that it's just something that makes apples. It's a very simple way to think about the tree, but it's not completely wrong. On the other hand, someone who thinks from first principles will want to know how this thing came to be. They'll see that the apple is attached to a branch and that each branch is a part of a larger whole called a stem. Eventually, they'll see that the root is the most important part of a tree because it's what makes the fruit grow. They have learned many things about the tree through experience, but they have also put the things they have learned in order of how they relate to each other. These loose pieces of information have been put together into a body of knowledge. People who don't think outside the box will think that you can put apple seeds anywhere and they will grow tasty apples. They don't really understand. When the first principles thinker looks at the roots, he or she will see that a tasty fruit starts with good dirt. They understand things in more than one way. At a drink party, the conventional thinker is the guy who knows all the interesting facts. His only information is about fruit that he can show. On the other hand, the person who thinks outside the box is always working on building trees of information. Like Aristotle, he or she goes back and forth between experience and reason to build a body of knowledge that is well organized and structured. If you put a tree in good soil, its roots will be strong and healthy, and it will grow fruit that tastes good. In the same way, a thought that grows from first principles that are true and beautiful will also be true and beautiful. Obviously, if the simple parts of a complicated whole are good and true, then the whole must also be good and true. This is important because, as we talked about in the last movie, getting power means having a true understanding of the world. Our complicated ideas can only be true if each part of them is true. Let's think about how to write an essay from the very beginning to make this more clear. A good article is like a tasty piece of fruit. It's fun to eat and hard to make without knowing how it works. We can figure out what's important by breaking it down into its parts. An essay is a group of lines put together. A paragraph, on the other hand, is a group of words. A line is made up of words, and each word is made up of letters. Letters are the most basic part of an essay. Once we know what makes up an essay, we can look at how to improve each part, from the easiest to the hardest. If we can make each part stand out, then the whole thing should stand out as well. This is the art of first principles thinking. Let's talk about what's good about it. Getting to the core of a thought has a lot of benefits. The first one is new ideas. Once you know how an idea works, you can rearrange, change, or put it together in a different way to come up with a new idea or product. In our case, we could have added one more layer on top of the essay. A book could be a group of articles put together. Now, we have made something new. The second benefit is that it can be optimized. If you want to make an idea or product better, you can change a key part of it. For example, once we knew what the main parts of the essay were, we could look closely at each one to see how it could be at its best. But you can't make any kind of change if you don't know about these parts. Integration is the third good thing. Once you understand how an idea works at its core, it's much easier to add new information to what you already know. For example, it is easy to make words once you know how to write letters. You can make sentences once you know how to write words. Once you can write lines, you can write paragraphs, then essays, then books, and then whole libraries. The last benefit is spreading the word. When you know how an idea is put together, it's easier to explain that complicated idea to someone else. You can start with the easiest part of the idea and build up from there. In schools, we try to do this very thing. We teach kids the alphabet, then how to write words, and so on. First principle thinkers make better teachers because they can pinpoint exactly where a student's knowledge breaks down. You can see the benefits, but how can you learn to think from first principles? It's simple, but not easy, to think from the beginning. I only have one piece of advice that you can use, and it comes from Aristotle. Make a list of things in order of importance, like we did with the writing example. Most ideas are stacked inside or outside of each other, and a first principles thinker's job is to figure out how these ideas are connected. Like all empiricists, Aristotle would say that experience is the source of information. All around you, the world is giving you food, which is a beautiful and complicated act of creation. Start by asking, why, or how, to find out where these ideas came from. The ultimate seeker of truth can't be happy with just fruit, but they know that the search for roots will never end. When they have broken a thought down to its most basic parts, they have reached the first principles. These basics can be used to come up with new ideas, improve things, learn more complicated ideas, or teach others. One of the best ways to learn these basics is to write down and organize information about something that interests you. By using a hierarchy or a mind map, like we did with the writing. So, this is the end of my short series on power. In the last film, I laid out a plan for power and talked about how to get it by being valuable. In this movie, I talk about a way that great thinkers often think. In the next video, I'm going to talk about something that might surprise you, the danger of thinking from first principles. How are you? With the great courses, you can make sure you have a wide range of high-quality teachers. This is one of the most important parts of your educational journey. Plus, you can get a free trial that gives you access to high-quality lectures and courses taught by some of the world's best teachers. They have a huge library with over 8,000 movies about almost anything you can think of, including science, philosophy, cooking, and even photography. I'm currently taking Professor David K. Johnson's course, The Big Questions of Philosophy, and in particular, the lecture on how to carefully think. To become a first principles thinker, you have to have very careful and sharp reasoning skills, so I really think you should take advantage of the deal and check it out. Thanks for watching.